Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. My name's Suzanne Sherman. I will be your host for the next hour. My very good friend and producer, Jeff Johnson, will finally get a chance to chime in. Boy, this week I have been quite the blabbermouth when I've been on the air. First, Mark Kreslins and I were on Monday for Constitution Day. Poor Jeff barely got a word in edgewise. And then on Tuesday, we had Ryan McMakin from Mises Institute come on, and we spent an entire hour talking about the Supreme Court and its highly exaggerated, inflamed role that it is playing in American politics and our system of government. I say time and time again, Supreme Court, which was intended to be the least harmful of the three branches of the general government, supposed to keep each other in check, has become, in fact, the most harmful, and the means by which this constitutional republic has been systematically dismantled. If you missed those shows, find us on SoundCloud. We have a SoundCloud page, Cerberus Radio Network. It's also up on YouTube, same name as well. Please subscribe, follow to both on SoundCloud. You can download our episodes for free. Also share them. Please share them with your friends. This was a really good couple of episodes we had this week. So if you missed them, check out our other shows as well. We have an app. You can go to our pages on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. Our fan page also, CRN. When you go there, Jeff, I believe there's a button. It says use the app, and we have a radio co-loop where we have content playing 24/7. My show here, the Wasatch Report, the Mark and Suzanne show, my latest show, Case in Point. I have 2 episodes up so far, Marbury versus Madison with Dr. Kevin Gutzman. And then I did a summary of my article with about Justice Antonin Scalia and how textualism as an approach to understanding the Constitution fails, as was indicated. Case in point in District of Columbia et al. Versus Heller. That has been touted as a gun rights victory. And as I explained in that episode and in the article published by the 10th Amendment Center, that really was not a victory for gun rights. I actually just completed my draft of the follow-up companion case or article to that one, and that is going to be about the city of Chicago versus McDonald, where Antonin Scalia, the originalist, ignores originalist interpretation methods and incorporates the Second Amendment upon the state's indirect contravention to our constitutional principles. Well, Jeff, today, as this week, fall is definitely in the air out here in Utah. Are you feeling it out there in Pennsylvania?
Oh, yeah, we are. The maples are really dropping their leaves. We will have no leaves on the trees here very, very shortly. It's getting cooler. It smells like fall here.
And what does that mean? Hunting.
No. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
It is getting
tree
close.
Season.
It is getting close. And, I want to talk about a couple things. As we say on the show, the Wasatch Report, everything from prepping to politics. I have to say I get a little caught up in the politics, and I've been a bit remiss talking about preparedness. There's so many other podcasts and shows that talk about it, but we're going to be getting into that a little bit today. I've had some friends share with me some of their experiences from Hurricane Florence. And one friend was out in North Carolina. I want to share her experiences there. But before we get into that, I want to, speaking of survival, share with you a resource and give a big shout out and a thank you to our good friend Brian Duff from Mind for Survival. He's got a great website, mind4survival.com. Also, you can follow him on social media. He has a Facebook page that you can join and ask questions as well. And I believe he's on Twitter as well. So check them out. And he's given us some assistance behind the scenes. Jeff, we're kind of winging this on our own. And I'm really grateful to the people that are helping us, supporting us, and our dedicated listeners. Last week, I thanked our good friend Bob Smiley for those memes he's been putting out and sharing and spreading the word. as well. I will also be speaking of preparedness going on Prepper Talk Radio in the very near future. We were going to go do that today, but K-Talk Media is actually changing locations, so they're moving today, but we're going to reschedule. You know, Jeff, we like to combine prepping and politics, and this is a good example. I explained to some visitors that were here the other day, you know, if we can get the people that are prepared, interested in the proper role of government, and if we can also get our political followers interested in preparedness, I say all along, you know, we are the people that can survive what is eventually going to happen when this system fails. Not if, but when. I hope it's in our lifetime so we can share our knowledge and help our kids get through this. But if we could do this, we can learn from our mistakes, rise from the ashes, and maybe avoid them. Or maybe we're destined to always seek government assistance in all things. So we'll have to see what happens. And as we hear from our good friend Jeff in Kansas, fall weather is in the air here in Kansas as well. Jeff, you had a friend that talked about an incident they had with a generator, as did I. Why don't we start with your friend first, and then we'll figure out how we can learn from this experience and avoid these mistakes that our friends have made this time around.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep it very vague because I want to keep this person anonymous. But basically, this person went just before the hurricane hit, bought a generator, couldn't get it to work, and was upset with the company that sold it to her. Not the fact that it wasn't purchased in advance and set up so everyone knew how to make it run.
No, you don't do that.
This is the problem with last second prepping, because it's bound to have a failure. When you're putting all your eggs in a basket at the last second, your eggs are going to go bad. And in this case, it was a failure for this person, and the person was very upset. And I'll just leave it at that, because I don't, you know, it's really not about this person. It's about the whole idea of getting set. If you live in a hurricane area, you should have a generator and you should run it. I told you just the other day, on I do it monthly. I go out and I go up to my mom's house and I start her generator and run it. And I start mine and run it. I make sure they're running, make sure they're working. I actually turn the power off, trip the disconnect from the grid, and I run it on load to make sure it works. If you're not doing that, and when you need it, it's probably not going to run for you.
And, you know, you really have to take into consideration what your needs are going to be depending on where you live. I have interviewed Dr. Arthur T. Bradley. He is the author of the Family Preparedness Disaster Handbook. It's a bestseller. You can get it on Amazon. It is absolutely wonderful. It was the first preparedness book that I bought. It is comprehensive. It will cover everything from food storage, backup power, water purification, hygiene, evacuation, the types of storms and the damages. You know, what he explains in this book is we, on this continental landmass, these United States, this continent is the most dangerous continent, piece of property, real estate on the globe, weather-wise. There is always something, Ed. And so think about what's going to affect you where you live. Now, where I live, our biggest danger here for me up in the mountains is going to be long-term power out and no and the kind of climate we get to 23 below, if not colder here. So one of the first things I put in when I moved was a generator, and we added an extra propane tank. So it's hooked up right to propane. But longer term, you know, you have to come up with other solutions, but that's beyond the scope of this discussion right now. I got a text when the hurricane hit land in North Carolina from a good friend of mine, and she told me, well, my power's out and my generator isn't working. You know, when you live in these areas, they have something called hurricane season. And I'm not putting this gal down, but, you know, especially when you know one's coming in. So she had one that was really good. But as you said, Jeff, mine's set up to exercise. They call it exercise. It runs on its own every Wednesday at 2:00. The time to make sure this stuff is up and running is when, first of all, I would say at the beginning of every hurricane season, hello, it happens every year. That's why they call it a season. You know one's coming. Fire it up. Do you have fuel? Have you changed the spark plugs? Is everything working? I think there's even an air filter on ours. We changed it, replaced the oil, replaced the spark plugs, keep these things up and running. So the text was, my trees are down in the driveway. The pool is destroyed. My generator isn't working. I'm going to start drinking. And I texted her back right away while she still had power on the phone. I said, this is the last thing you need to do right now. Well, I'm unhappy. Folks, when there's a situation like this, you really need to keep your wits about you. It might sound fun to sit down, get drunk, or whatever your indulgence of choice might be. Keep your wits about you. You never know. You might have to get out. There could be down power lines. And if you are not cognizant and able to move around quickly and nimbly and with common sense, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Anything else on that regard, Jeff?
Yeah, you brought up a good point. Yes. These generators have air filters and fuel filters. Now, your propane one may have a fuel filter. I don't know about that. I don't have a propane one. But I know gasoline ones do. Make sure you change them at least annually. Change those fuel filter and air filters. That way they run efficiently and they will work for you. Also, make sure they again, spark plug, like you mentioned. Make sure you don't have to do that annually, but make sure it's in good shape. After a while, they do kind of burn down, so they won't fire as well. So anyway, just do some preventative maintenance so that when the next hurricane comes, you're not sitting there on Facebook crying the blues about not having a generator.
Yeah, and the other thing is a lot of people, this happened, I believe it was after Hurricane Matthew, a lot of people that thought they'd be covered because they had solar panels. Well, we don't need to worry about the grid because we've got solar, and if the power's out, hey, the sun will still be shining. What people don't understand, because now what we're seeing is a lot of these government incentive programs where, hey, you can get solar for nothing down, and you're getting all these government subsidies, which, by the way, only increase the cost of solar panels now. So these people that bought into these, these government programs, what they don't understand is these solar panels that they do at no money down are connected to the power grid. In Florida, when Matthew was over, people thought that they could just use their solar and hook up, found that until the grid was fixed by the local government, they had no power that they were relying upon. So this is what I tell you time and time again. The more you depend on the government, the greater the calamity, the greater your disappointment's going to be. So if you have panels or not, one of the things I would do, I really want to get off, not necessarily off grid, but I would definitely like some panels that I will pay for myself. Even if the battery storage system isn't going to be very helpful, it is very expensive, from what I understand, to get enough battery backup to run overnight with these things and keep it going. But, you can at least run it during the day and then run your generator in the evening if you need to. Have some backups. I have backups for heating here. I've got a wood stove. I have a furnace. I also have a propane fireplace here that won't rely on any electricity if I need it. So think about what you're doing. Think about what is going to affect you most. If you have large trees in front of your house, near your house, Jeff, the first fatality in Florence, this was heartbreaking. This was a family that was home, and a tree crashed down on their house and killed a mother and an infant. I just, these things happen. What's your answer? Cut all the trees down? I don't know. But, if there's a tree that doesn't look like it's in the best health, or you need to maybe trim it up a little bit, think about that. That was the very first fatality in this last storm. Very sad.
Yeah, and you really do. If you're going to put solar in, do some research, because yes, as you said, grid tied is grid tied. They will not work if the grid is not up. Now, the off grid, you have to have battery storage, and it can be very expensive. You said the batteries are very expensive, but they will work off grid. So, hence, grid tied, off grid. This goes without saying, I think.
I've got an article we'll look at in a little bit. I don't know if I think I shared it with you, and it said, are you a target if you live off grid? As we're seeing right now, a lot of cities and municipalities do not want people living off grid. And we'll have to get into that in a little bit as well. You know what? I want to also give a big congratulations our friends over at Tail Gunner and Back at the Cabin Line. Brian got his first bull elk in archery season. These friends of mine left. They escaped California earlier this summer, and they are happily now entrenched in Arizona, and he got his first bull elk, and I got the pictures. They're absolutely beautiful. So big congratulations to them. Jeff, let's talk a little bit about, we've had some incidents I've heard about in hunters' safety. There was one incident in Wyoming, I think we discussed this, where a guide was mauled. He was killed by a grizzly bear. I think the major problem people have, when I was you were at PrepperCon with me last year, and I asked, remember the celebrity panel, we had Michael Hawk and Dave Holliday, and I asked the panel, what do you think is the biggest mistake people make when they go out into the wilderness? And his answer was underestimating your capabilities. The thing with archery hunting, in some states, you're not allowed to have a firearm with you. Can you do that in Pennsylvania? I know you can't in Utah.
No, I believe both New York and Pennsylvania, it is illegal to carry a firearm on you while you're archery hunting. So, if a bear comes at you, you're pretty much out of luck. And I was there when you asked that question, and my thought immediately when you asked that question was it's actually two parts: that you overestimate your abilities, and you underestimate Mother Nature to be the witch that she can be.
Exactly. And that was my answer to that problem. And I think they're both equally dangerous. So, you overestimate your capabilities, and the underestimation of how dangerous it can actually be. Oh, and I was told that, yes, in Arizona, they can carry while archery hunting. I think you'd be crazy not to. Out here, we had, just at the opening day of deer season for archery, a hunter was mauled by a mountain lion. So you're out there. This guy was mauled by a grizzly bear. And again, we'll get into that story in just a minute. And yes, Brian saw a huge mountain lion just across the street from where I am, Jeff. We had some friends that were hunting deer on their land. And as they're going through the sagebrush, my friend kicked out a mountain lion. The thing was hunkered down, and when my friend stepped close, the thing, thank God, ran off. But I've seen big bobcats out there when we're elk hunting, and we are in mountain lion country. If you go further north, you go into Wyoming and Montana, well, then you're dealing with the grizzly bears. Here we also have moose, and quite honestly, that's the biggest danger that we see here. But let's talk a little bit about this incident that happened with the bear. And this was in Wyoming. We had a 37-year-old guide. Guy had 5 kids. It's a really tragic story. And I think when this story first came out, some of the facts were a little bit confused. The original story that came out was he went in after this bear the next day, and once he was attacked, the customer, the hunter who actually shot the bear, I think it was with an arrow, threw a pistol at the guide so he could defend himself. The guide died, and everybody was upset with this guy for throwing a gun when he should have been shooting the bear. Here's a story that seems to clarify things. Early reports, and this was in actually ammoland.com. Early reports of the fatal grizzly bear attack on guide Mark Uptain and client Clory Chabon have been confused about many details. The attack on the bow hunter, so yes, this was an archery hunt, occurred on September 14th in Wyoming. Chabon was said to have thrown a pistol to Uptain and run away. Facts come to light, and they are more nuanced. Now, I'm bringing this story up for a reason, because a lot of people rely on bear spray when they go to these places. Mark Uptain appears to have relied on a can of bear spray to deter the attack. A can of bear spray with the safety off was found at the site. The adult sow grizzly had bear spray on her at the scene. The bear was shot and killed as she attacked investigating Fish and Wildlife personnel. The intra-agency search for the missing guide was suspended Friday evening and resumed Saturday morning. His body was found that day. His fatalities consistent with a bear attack. An investigation found a discharged can of bear spray with the safety off near the body. It was later determined that the sow had been sprayed with bear spray. The evidence of the empty can of bear spray and the spray on the attacking grizzlies show the fatal bear spray failure. Reporters have talked to both the customer Shubon and his father. Corey lives in Florida, but Frank, the father, lives in Pennsylvania, your neck of the woods, Jeff. The interviews have been conducted separately. The differences between what reporters say Corey's father said and what Corey Shubon said are adding to the confusion. The father was not on site when it happened, so why they're questioning him is beyond me, but that's our media, correct? The father must be relying on details he heard from Corey or others. One report from Orlando said that Shubon and Uptain were mounted on horses when attacked and that Shubon was dragged off his horse and swung through the air by the sow grizzly, but Corey says that he was not dragged from the horse. What he said is, this report is extremely inaccurate. I was never grabbed from my horse. I wasn't airlifted to the hospital. No one ever said I needed surgery on my Achilles. A report from Buckrail said he was flown to the hospital. In an interview with him, he said he attempted to toss a pistol to Mark Uptain while being swung about by the grizzly, but the pistol did not make it to Mark. Jeff, if you were out there, would you throw a pistol at a guy being attacked by a grizzly?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what was going through his mind, so I can't really talk to his mind. But it doesn't make sense. I would be firing the weapon. At least the noise of the weapon firing, even if you missed, might startle the animal, might break the attack. I don't know. I mean, this is just very tragic, and it just goes to prove that if you're hunting, because one report said that they were removing an elk that was shot. See, there's so many stories you don't even know which one to believe anymore. Yeah. So if they were dragging an elk out, if you're dragging a deer out here, even here in Pennsylvania, and a black bear, I've seen black bears between 500 and 600 pounds here in the East. They're big animals. They're going to hurt you bad, especially if it's a sow with cubs. You know, if you see one, just move the other way. Try to put distance on them. The deer is not worth dying for, or the elk is not worth dying for. You know, in this situation, it's just tragic. Just be aware of your surroundings. Know what's going on. That's, again, situational awareness. Whether it's in a parking lot, going to a store, or out in the woods with dangerous animals around, bears or mountain lions, just be aware of your surroundings. Don't be daydreaming off in someplace else and not paying attention to what's going on around you.
And, you know, even I had a friend that was hunting out in Montana a year ago, and he said that when he got there, they were talking about an incident that had happened just before he arrived. A man was attacked by a grizzly bear, and he had a .45 caliber sidearm on him, emptied 5 rounds into this bear, and they both died. They died together. So, you know, again, like you said, situational awareness, but you're out there, if you're hunting, you're quiet. Now, these people should have been making more noise since they were retrieving this, but the bear was probably attracted, first of all, to the kill, and she had cubs. So, you know, this is, I think they did say she had cubs. So the thing is, if you're out there, I'd like to address the myth of bear spray, because I go to Glacier National Park. I've been to Yellowstone, and I don't go way to the backcountry there because I don't have a concealed carry permit, and I can't bring that into the parks and conceal carry. But the myth of bear spray, what do you do, Jeff, if a bear's bearing down on you, no pun intended, and the wind is blowing in your direction, and you need to spray this bear with some bear spray? What are you going to do?
You're going to end up spraying yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. I have a funny story with bear spray. We were driving through from Badlands to Glacier, and I knew we were going to be going into grizzly country. And so I had some in my RV. My younger son at the time, we got out of the RV, and my older son and he decided apparently to stay in and not go in. We were going to get a coffee. We're driving through Montana, and a few minutes later, he comes into the shop, and his eyes are kind of red, and he's always dealt with allergies and stuff. And says, "You want some ice cream?" "Nope, I'm good." Whatever. So we start to go into the motorhome as we're leaving. He says, "Don't go to the RV." I said, "What? Don't go to the RV." "What? don't go into the RV. So what does my older son do? Runs into the RV. My younger one had decided to see what the bear spray would do and sprayed it in the bathroom. It is strong stuff. Strong enough to stop a grizzly? I don't know. It ruined our day, but I tell you what, I would not want to use that to keep me alive. I'm spoiled in Utah. We've got all the big game here. We don't have the grizzlies, and I sure hope it stays that way.
I don't know whether they work or not. I have heard that if you spray a grizzly with bear spray, all you end up with is one pissed off grizzly. And I've been sprayed, not with bear spray. As part of law enforcement, we get sprayed, and it's awful. But the fact of the matter why we get sprayed is because that you can work your way through that. You can continue to fight if you get sprayed. It's uncomfortable. It's not fun, but that's why we do it. You train so you can work your way through it. Can a bear work its way through getting sprayed and being really pissed off? I could imagine so.
Yeah, I'm a little, like I said, I'm a little bit spoiled. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with those. But my outfitter friend out here that I hunt with, he was tossed through the air like a rag doll. And this is a big dude, probably 6'5", over 300 pounds. And this moose circled back on him and tossed him through the air, dislocated his arm, broke his ribs, and just stomped him. In fact, one of my friend's neighbors in Park City was attacked by a cow moose whose calf was nearby as well. So, as we get out, either for hunting or hiking in the summertime, do not underestimate nature and do not overestimate your capabilities. Do not underestimate the ferociousness of those critters that are actually out there. I want to take a minute also to talk about some of the other stuff I've been doing up here. It's just nice to take a break from the politics a little bit and share a little bit of the lifestyle up here for people that like to be prepared and self-reliant. Is I've been growing, like I used to do in California, tomatoes once again, and this is a great time of year when your harvests are coming in. And you can start putting up all the fruits, no pun intended, of your labor for the summertime. And so I've been processing tomatoes, putting that up, pressure canning them. And I want to encourage people to think about other ways of again, storing food that you will not have to be reliant on a freezer. Canning food is a great way to do it. It is a great way to preserve your harvest. And then now what do we have coming up? As I said, hunting season. Consider canning your meats. I had somebody send me a message yesterday. They wanted to make some venison chili. Is that something good you can can? Absolutely. I think it's a great way. I love to can some of my harvests. And what I like to do, just if you haven't thought of that already, is grind it up yourself, cook it like you would ground beef with some onions, some seasonings, and then I pressure can it. And it's there. We want to add it to chili, or you can make your stews ahead of time. The idea is if you're ever in this situation where you need food storage, you can't cook it, or if it's difficult to use your resources, you can just pop these cans open and just eat them straight from the jars. And it is a great way to maintain your food. And again, if you're out of power for a long time and you cannot rely on your freezer, it is a great way to store food. Anybody's welcome to contact me. I'm happy to share my recipes and how we do this. There's a great video actually on pressure canning. I'll share. And I'll tell you what, Jeff, it was the same one that I have. I have a 21 quart, I think it's called an All-American pressure canner. And there's a video that walks you through step by step by step. And I use that one. I have been doing it constantly. We're going to bring on, after we take a break, we're going to feature some music by Tristan Dunn. And it's called Ain't Coming Down. It's about the Virginia battle flag. And that's not coming down as far as he's concerned. And he's got the Kenny Rogers Band backing him up here. And we're going to take a quick break. Then we will get Ben McClintock. He's joining us. And I guess he's having an issue with his phone, Jeff. We'll take a quick break and hopefully he'll be able to resolve that. And we will get back either with Ben McClintock or some other fun stories. But we hope Ben comes on because he's got some interesting stuff going on. I told you about there was a problem that I think he has resolved in his favor now with CPS over the treatment of their daughter with leukemia. And we're going to talk hopefully about Propositions 2, 3, and 4 out here in Utah. Again, if we can't resolve his technical issues with connecting with us, we've got a few other stories to tell. So how about we cut to break, Jeff, over here at Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Walked out of the grocery store just the other day. Saw my flag waving in the wind, said, throw that trash away. I said, ma'am, I am a Christian man and I bleed American pride. That flag's gonna stay right where it is, and here's my reason why. Granddaddy fought that fellow Wood and my uncle at Normandy. And their blood ran through my daddy's veins, and that blood still runs through me. My family's all stood ready when the wolf drowned at the door. So when you curse that flag, you curse their names to still come back for more. You can say what you want to say, and you can do what you want to do, but I've got the right to wave my flag of freedom, and I don't care how it upsets you. You can scream and cuss, you can make a fuss, you can curse my name all over town, but I'll tell you right now that the flag ain't coming down. No, that flag ain't coming down. Stars and stripes are all red, white, and blue. You've got that right to express yourself, but I've got that right too. So you can say what you want to say, and you can do what you want to do, but I'm gonna keep on waving my flag of freedom. I don't give a damn just how it offends you. You can scream and cuss, you can make a fuss, you can curse my name all over town, but I'll tell you right now that the flag ain't coming down. No, that flag, no, that flag, no, that flag. It ain't coming down.
Well, that was a nice little break. Thank you, Jeff, for playing that song. I want to thank Tristan Dunn for sharing that with us. And that is a song called Ain't Coming Down. That is a song that's available. Tristan Dunn, again, is the artist. We're welcome artists that have music they'd like to share. As you know, we're strictly limited by what we can do with copyright issues on YouTube and SoundCloud. And if we get to showcase artists that would like some exposure, we're happy to do so. We really appreciate this opportunity. Again, Ain't Coming Down by Tristan Dunn, available on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, Apple Music, Napster, and Pandora Music. I think we have Ben McClintock. Is that true? Is he with us, Jeff?
It looks like he's in here.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, that's going to work. Hey, everybody, I want to thank you. This past half hour on Cerberus Radio Network here on the Wasatch Report, we have been taking a break from the politics a little bit. This week, we talked about Constitution Day. Mark Kreslin's on Monday. And on Tuesday, Ryan McMakin from Mises Institute joined me. We talked about the bloated influence the Supreme Court has on our system of government here. Now we're going to focus a little bit on what is going on in Utah. We also want to talk about interference in our governor, in our family lives, and Ben can attest to that. Ben, let's start. You have an organization called Defending Utah, a radio show on K-Talk Media by that same name. I've appeared with you on there before. I want to thank you for that opportunity. I want to thank you for joining me today. How's everything going for you?
Yeah, things are going good. Appreciate being on.
I like having you on. Let's see. Let's get an update with your situation. First of all, how's your daughter doing?
She's doing really well. She's improving. In fact, it was kind of interesting the other day. The doctor said, "Are you giving her medicine because she's doing too well?"
Say that again. Let me wipe the coffee off my keyboard. Are you giving her the medicine we want you to give her because she's too healthy and happy right now? That's the problem, right? I'm rubbing my head.
Totally bizarre. It was surreal when she said it. I was just like, what?
Okay.
And yeah.
Let's back up a minute. For those that aren't familiar, your daughter, she's 5 years old. Nevaeh, is that
Nevaeh? Yeah.
Nevaeh. You thought she had some sort of a flu or a virus. She was taken to the doctor because, as we know, you are good parents. Well, we think that it's probably just a flu. Let's see what happens. A few days later, she wasn't doing as well. You bring her back in. She's life-flighted to Children's Primary, the University Hospital in Salt Lake City. Quick catch up with that, please.
Yeah. And so we get there, and they diagnose her with 2 life-threatening blood infections, as well as leukemia. And so we're there for 2 or 3 weeks, and during that time, they tell us that the chemo that they're going to give her is very mild, so mild she won't even lose her hair. So we consent, and we come home, she loses her hair, and they tell us, that they would have never said that to you because that just doesn't happen. Of course, her hair is going to fall out, and other different things. They actually, what's it called? They contaminated one of the tests to find out what was the problem. A second time we went, just all kinds of different problems with the hospital, lies, miscommunications, just problems that they had there. And so we sought for a second opinion, found out that that's illegal in the state of Utah. You can choose any doctor you want. You can have any color you want as long as it's black. And the same thing with choosing medical care for a minor in the state of Utah. You have to if you want a second opinion, it has to be from the same kind of doctor as the original diagnosis. So it has to be relevant to the original diagnosis. You can't get somebody else to say, hey, maybe there's something else going on we can look at. And then even if you get like in our case with cancer, if you get an oncologist that says, oh, you know what, you don't need chemo, we got something else for you, that the state can actually ignore that, actually has in statute the preference to ignore it and force you, compel you by law without, under threat of losing your child, if you don't choose the traditional prescribed remedy.
The thing is, too, how many of these doctors are friends? I actually had a friend who had a sonogram that indicated she might have a breast cancer tumor. So she went to get a second opinion, and before the other doctor would even consider that, he wanted the report from the previous doctor. The point is to get a second unbiased opinion. A blind opinion, yeah. What the doctor said, well, I don't want to go against your first doctor. How many of these people are buddies and don't want to contradict each other? And why in the world would anybody want the report from the first doctor so they couldn't go away from? I would think, do you really expect me to pay you for this service? You just repeat somebody else. So to back up, they said, you are free, thank you very much, overlords, to get a second opinion. However, it damn well better coincide with the first one with the treatment that we recommend. So it really isn't a choice. Like you said, you can have any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah.
So you ran into some issues with CPS. What happened there?
Yeah, so
We had,
because of the
by the
one
way,
miss-
we had Ben McClintock on a previous show to talk about this as well. So now CPS here. So here you have this devastating diagnosis. Your beautiful little girl. How many kids do you have? Like 8 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So this beautiful little girl has this horrific diagnosis. I saw the look in your eyes of a man who did not know if his child was going to live to the end of the day. I saw you in the hospital. I visited you and your wife there. Hi, we're the government. How can we wreck your life even more? So what happened?
So because we missed the one appointment, the hospital calls CPS. They, of course, initiate an investigation. We continue to go to the doctor. We tell him we're going to second opinion. He says, no, you can't. So we say, oh, you're going to lose your child. So we struggle with that, but we say, okay, fine. We'll continue to go. We go for like 2 more months, 8 more weeks of dealing with that hospital. And even after that, complying with everything they've said, now they want to continue to open the investigation. They want to do an in-home investigation without us present. They want to do a one-on-one interview with our 5-year-old without us present.
I would think you would be a bad parent if you allowed your 5-year-old daughter to be with a stranger unsupervised, but that's just me.
Exactly. It's crazy. And so and that's exactly, we're like, that doesn't seem right. We call our lawyer, Garrett Smith from Peace Legal. He contacts CPS and says, where does it require them to do this? And so they send out rules saying this is where they're required to do it. Garrett looks through it and says, this doesn't say he's required to. And I don't appreciate you saying that he is. The CPS guy writes back and says, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that it was required.
Liar,
Okay.
liar, pants on fire.
Yeah, we'll cancel the visit. And then, of course, what must have been his supervisor screaming down his neck, he comes back and says, no, we have credible evidence, and we need to do a visit based on credible evidence. So my lawyer says, what's the definition of credible evidence, and what is the credible evidence? So his first response is, I don't know the definition of credible evidence. And like, that's literally what he said, which is just crazy. So how can you say you have it if you don't even know what it is? And then he goes on to describe what the credible evidence is. We missed one appointment 2 months ago. That's the credible evidence of abuse, right? And so Garrett says that there's nowhere in the rules. We're not doing it because it's not in the rules. And so they reply back that they're going to go to the courts. So I get a summons back from CPS, to appear in court, and on there, the CPS agent swears under oath that he saw us not allowing our child to eat or drink, and that she had a altered mental state, and that we need to go to court to prove that, to go before a judge to have CPS take our child away from us. And so we go on the air, we make a bunch of fuss. We get a letter from the hospital. The head oncologist had no idea anybody from his office was even contacting CPS. He writes a letter on our behalf. We get a legislator to call on our behalf, and all of a sudden we get a call where they've dropped the investigation, and the CPS agent that swore under oath left a voicemail saying he has no evidence against me, even though he claimed that he saw me not giving my child food or water. And so and then they were so gracious, and they said, well, as long as you continue to go to the hospital, we will drop this investigation.
How big of them. Imagine, Ben, how many times this goes unreported. You were able to make a huge stink across all of Utah. I know other stations have dealt with, have shared your story. I know we did here as well. What about all the people that don't have the access to the media that you do? How many times have they gotten away with this? I shared with you a story when I was on an appellate panel for the 6th District Court of Appeal in California, state courts, where these women that were on a juvenile dependency panel were talking about, they were quoting other members of CPS saying, oh, I found a great child for my friend so-and-so, which is a great way to circumvent the difficult adoption process. They just go find kids for their buddies. And I have my wonderful friend Robin chiming in. I would be hard pressed not to beat that caseworker. Oh, Robin, such a potty mouth, you young lady. But yeah, I totally agree with her. I think I would have ended up in leg irons. So Ben, I gotta congratulate you for your, not congratulate you, but commend you on your gracious behavior throughout this whole episode. I honestly think I would have been in leg irons, but thank God you did have this ability to get the story out. Maybe they will be more circumspect and how they try to ramrod these families. Let's turn our attention. We will continue to pray for Nevaeh's continued recovery. Is she on the way home?
Yeah, just one more thing on that. I mean, there was just a story that came out that talked about how CPS told judges they didn't know it was illegal to lie to get children out of people's homes. And so, since this has happened, since we've gone public, I've gotten email after email of similar stories happening to people where they lie under oath, and the parent, of course, is the liar because they want to keep their kid, and the CPS worker would never lie. It's just insanity. It happens over and over again. CPS is an illegal agency that should be disbanded immediately. Well,
clearly, I'm sure the person that lied under oath is going to get some sort of disciplinary action. So you let me know when that happens, so we'll get you back on the show.
Well, we'd like to, because we have them on audio committing perjury. So we're going to try and go even that route, maybe.
I will help you any way I can, please. Right. We've got some propositions out in Utah. I was on your show with Stanley discussing Proposition 2. I would like to revisit that issue.
Bradley, yeah.
Yeah, but you also said, and I also want to make sure that we announce that event that you have coming up as well, I think on the 28th or 29th. Propositions 3 and 4, you said, have the potential to be extremely damaging to Utah. Let's go into that. Then we'll wrap up with a little discussion about Prop 2.
So Prop 3 is a bill that would, or of course, democracy. It's an initiative that would expand Obamacare to expand Obamacare through expanding Medicaid. And so which would increase federal government control over medicine in Utah even more than it already has. And it would also put Utah taxpayers on the line to fill the gap, because the federal government only takes care of it for the first 2 or 3 years, and then the state is required to take over.
Hang on one second, Jeff. While we're talking about this, look under Article 1, Section 8 for medical care and funding of medical care. Okay, while he's doing that.
Right. So the federal government doesn't have the authority to do it. And then the states, of course, it would just against natural law to force people to, take from one person to give to another. And so it's just a really...
For the children?
It's for the children, of course. It's always for the children or the homeless or, other downtrodden people. And it's just, it's ridiculous for the taxpayer or for the voters to put us under the thumb of the federal government because of charity. Whatever it is that they're claiming it is. This actually takes away medical freedom. Any medical freedom we have left would actually... They talk about how it's just about helping the poor. Well, all of the strings attached to this make it even worse than just forced welfare. It actually affects all medical care in the state.
Yeah, and when I was in Salt Lake City when they were talking about putting this on, a gal came up to me with trying to get me to sign a petition. Oh, yeah. Asked to grant more children access to health care. I said, what's the proper role of government? Looks at me, blank stare. I said, what do you think government should be doing? Blank stare. I said, the proper role of government, let me help you out with this, is to protect our liberty. I said, please tell me, is it moral or is it ethical to send somebody to someone else's door, demand money at gunpoint to pay for somebody else's medical service? And again, blank stare. I said, let me tell you what you're doing. I'm old enough to probably not have to live through the worst of the policies you are trying to ram down our throats. You, however, young lady, are standing there with a noose around your neck attached to the branch of a sapling that you are watering. someday you're going to remember this crazy lady that you tried to get to sign this petition and realize, oh my goodness, she was right. So let's turn to Proposition 4. In California, we had something like this go on recently, and surprise, surprise, the new districts heavily favored the Democrats. I was just out in California, and they're talking about promoting democracy, getting everybody to vote, democracy, 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 and equality, equality, equality. That's all you hear. That rust, that filth is starting to permeate the society of Utah. Let's talk about Prop 4.
So under the guise of preventing gerrymandering, this proposition would create an independent commission that would draw the borders for us.
And that's what we had in California.
And if anybody thinks that an independent, unaccountable commission is going to draw better boundaries than elected officials that are accountable to the people, I've got a bridge to sell you. You know, sure, there might be gerrymandering going on, but it's this, under their own language, the goals that they have set forward and what the boundaries must entail, what they are doing is they're trying to make us like California. They're totally taking away accountability. And they, under this initiative, they are required to draw boundaries to make contests competitive. So even if Utah is not competitive, if you've got an area that's conservative, they've got to draw boundaries that make it that make it competitive. And so you've got an area that's all Republican or all Democrat. They've got to change it. And so this is going to take away accountability in the legislature, actually, because now they're going to be saying, oh, I can't, even more excuses of why they can't pass liberty because, oh, the other party won't let me. And if I do that, then I'll lose the election. And so it's going to take away any accountability we have left with our legislators.
Does this stand a good chance of passing, in your opinion?
Yes, because it's being ignored. They're focusing on Prop 2 and ignoring every other initiative, basically.
Prop 2 really is the belle of the ball right now. And that's the thing. That's what they do from every level. We get this huge distraction while something far more nefarious comes in. Now, interestingly enough, you and I are very much pro-liberty. We are pro-freedom. But somehow we are both against Proposition 2. I say it's a Trojan horse. Why don't you explain? Proposition 2 is the medical marijuana law. We see pictures of kids having seizures, but from my understanding, will children even be able to benefit? How limited in scope is this going to be? Is it good? I have a sneaking suspicion Prop 2 is not going to be something beneficial for patients that can't get relief otherwise. I think it's going to be beneficial for government.
Oh, it's a huge benefit to government and their cronies. Under Prop 2, only 15 people will be allowed to open up dispensaries. They're only going to be allowed to issue 15 licenses, and it will only be to their buddies because you have to have over $500,000 in liquid assets before you can even apply for this permission slip to have a cannabis shop. And under that, it creates a database that tracks the businesses, it tracks the consumers completely, and makes it part of a national database tracking anybody that is taking part in the system. And it gives all regulatory, it creates, it gives, in the Department of Health, it gives them all legislative power, all executive power, and all judicial power over medical cannabis. It also gives them all authority of telling you how much you're allowed to have. And then also, with part of that database, it's being used in other states to take away otherwise law-abiding people's guns away.
Yes.
And so it's a real, it's just a real boondoggle.
We've already heard, go ahead.
With the children aspect of it, with the bill that we talked about before, it only allows children, because it's not a traditional prescription, it only allows you to have marijuana for children in addition to the poisonous chemo treatment, not instead of.
So we've seen studies that prove cannabis, THC, kills cancer cells. We have seen the healing aspects of this plant. we have seen the devastating effects that chemotherapy cause. So it should be the parents' decision, but as we've seen with what happened to you, look what happens when you try to take care of your own child as a free individual. And by being against this, we're not trying to stop people from suffering. Obviously, we know people are suffering and don't have access to this, that need to have access to it. But the problem is, as you mentioned, this is going to track people. With a medical marijuana card, they've already said, if you have a medical marijuana card, you will lose your Second Amendment rights. Again, the federal government has absolutely no authority to regulate firearms. I recently purchased a pistol. Now there's a new question on the background check. Do you use any antidepressants, other drugs, or medical marijuana or otherwise, even in a state where it is lawful to use? So if you're exercising your lawful right in a state like California, Colorado, I think there are 26 of them, California and Colorado, you can use it recreationally. If you are doing something legal in your state, the federal government unlawfully, remember, unconstitutional laws are unlawful. They are null and void, have no legal effect. They're going to say, we don't care. We are going to not only ignore the 10th Amendment, we're going to ignore the restrictions imposed upon us in the Second Amendment and say you're not allowed to have your gun. Well, what if you sign that? And what if you go to the doctor and get a card or tell the doctor, yeah, I've been using marijuana and boy, howdy, I'm feeling better. It is not inconceivable that these records won't be cross-referenced or there won't be a flag, some sort of a notification that will, show up, and then they come get you, and then they could say, hey, you committed perjury. Is it perjury when you lie when somebody has no lawful authority to even ask you that question? Interesting concepts. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, we can see that going on right now with tax law, and so I mean, it's to say that that's just outrageous or a conspiracy theory or paranoid is ridiculous based on history. Additionally, the legislature and the governor have already promised to have a special session whether the bill passes or not, and so basically we have a situation where Prop 2, even if passes, will not become law, and so they're saying we have to pass Prop 2 to find out what's in Prop 2 because it's going to be changed by the legislature after the election.
So what are they going to do differently? We don't know. And in fact, I made a comment on one of the debates about that. We have to pass this law to see what's in it. So what do you see the legislature doing? And also the Mormon churches, what's their official stance on this now?
They're against it. They're against Prop 2, but they want the legislature to pass legislation. I'm not really clear what their reasoning behind it. They've kind of deferred to the lawyers and whatnot, and so it's kind of fuzzy on the reasons why and whatnot. But the legislature is sure to make it even worse. As bad as Prop 2 is, I guarantee you the legislature is going to make it even worse. There's actually a well-connected organization called the Buckshot Caucus that is set to benefit financially as a monopoly on the credit card processing of medical marijuana. And
follow the money, huh?
Exactly.
See, in California, you can go in there and pay cash. In Utah, in Colorado, you can go into these dispensaries. You just show your ID to show that you're 21 or over. They don't keep the information. They don't put you in any kind of registration. In fact, in Colorado, and the one I had seen, you have to pay cash only. So it's interesting the way the different ones are run. We're going to be out of time really quickly. Ben, you've got an event coming up. Let us know what it is.
Yes, on September 29th, go to DeseretFamily.org to register. We have Ammon Bundy coming to speak on restoring liberty, as well as we are going to be speaking about the deep state in Utah and exposing them and laying out a plan that we can all implement to be able to restore liberty in Utah.
You can frequently hear Ben with me on K-Talk Radio, Inside the News with Paul Jensen. He also has his own show. I believe that's on Saturday afternoons. Am I correct?
Correct. Noon to 2.
Noon to 2. So check him out. Ben McClintock, Defending Utah. Join the fight. We are working our way. You're doing great things out here. Ben, I want to thank you for joining me today. Jeff Johnson, I want to thank you for our fun little talk on preparedness at the beginning of this show. It was a nice little break. We're about out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. Coming up on a show very soon will be Donnie Kennedy, who is the author of Lincoln's Marxists, as well as The South Was Right. He will also be at that Abbeville Institute in Dallas. We'll talk more about, and we have been talking about. Thanks for joining in. This has been the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.